Ford, the all-American automaker, is now making a move that few saw coming, shifting manufacturing of its Focus and C-Max models out of Wayne, Michigan. What should have been a routine business update turned into a bombshell. Ford's CEO fired the first shot in a brewing corporate war, one that's rattling the foundations of the White House. This isn't just about tariffs. It's about an economic philosophy clash between a company fighting to stay competitive and a president wielding policy like a sledgehammer. Ford's supply chain, spanning Canada, Mexico, and East Asia, is suddenly caught in the crosshairs of Trump's America First trade agenda. 60% of the parts used in Ford vehicles are now affected by tariffs, pushing costs through the roof and putting billions of dollars and thousands of American jobs on the line. Ford didn't just disagree with the policy, it broke a century-long tradition of quiet loyalty to the government. That break exposed deep cracks in Trump's economic playbook. Are we witnessing the start of a manufacturing exodus? Trump's trade strategy relies on taxing foreign goods, rewarding domestic production, and reviving Rust Belt towns. But Ford argues the plan is unworkable. Tariffs on raw materials like aluminum and lithium don't punish foreign countries, they penalize American manufacturers who have no local alternatives. These costs then land squarely on U.S. consumers. Far from politics, this is about survival. Ford isn't interested in blowing up global trade norms, they're trying to survive them. As a multinational company, Ford's existence depends on complex, cross-border operations, moving parts, resources, and ideas at lightning speed. Then came the boiling point. At a Michigan rally packed with blue-collar voters, Trump didn't hold back. He accused Ford of turning its back on American workers, shipping jobs overseas, and choosing profits over patriotism. The crowd erupted in chants of "Bring jobs back." Trump threatened tariffs, penalties, and even cutting off federal contracts. His message was simple: if you want to sell in America, you better make it in America. The crowd loved it. The message was emotional, powerful, but for Ford, it was dangerous. Now they weren't just a company making hard calls in a tough market. They were a target, a symbol of defiance. But Ford wasn't going to back down. Days after the rally, the automaker issued a response, not an apology, but a strategic manifesto. They framed their international shift not as betrayal, but as a calculated move to lead in electric vehicle tech. They pointed to continued investment in U.S. R&D and tech jobs but made one thing clear: survival comes first. Ford's position was cold, calculated. They saw the backlash coming: political heat, threats, and boycotts. But they went ahead anyway, because this wasn't just about the present. It was about beating Tesla, surviving supply chain disruptions, and staying viable in a world racing toward EV dominance. The company's statement emphasized strategic decisions over short-term appeasement. It was a line in the sand, and they didn't blink. So what pushed Ford to this point? In short, tariffs. Aluminum costs jumped 20%, steel surged with a 25% surcharge on Canadian imports, and Chinese lithium, vital for batteries, got slapped with a 10% tax. For Ford, scaling EV production under those conditions became a financial nightmare. Meanwhile, global supply chains were fragile, plagued by shipping delays, semiconductor shortages, and raw material gaps. The cost of building EVs in the US skyrocketed, and the margins, already razor-thin, started bleeding red. Behind the scenes, Ford's boardroom turned into a battleground. The core question wasn't whether tariffs hurt, it was whether Ford would hold the line out of patriotic duty or pivot to survive. The electric strategy team laid out the brutal numbers: keep EV production in the US and lose money on every vehicle, shift key operations abroad and stay in the game. One executive reportedly asked, "Do we want to make headlines for loyalty, or still be here in 5 years?" That question shifted the tide. The decision was made quietly. Ford would restructure. Final assembly, battery cells, and material sourcing would increasingly rely on global hubs: Mexico, Europe, Southeast Asia. This wasn't about politics. It was about staying alive. The messaging was careful, strategic adaptation replaced cost-cutting. But internally, everyone knew the truth, this was Ford dodging an existential bullet. And on the factory floor, in places like Detroit and Louisville, the reaction was heartbreak. For generations, Ford stood as a symbol of stability. Now, that trust was cracking. Workers voiced their anger and fear in union halls, wondering what continued investment really meant when their shifts were disappearing. Union leaders pushed Ford for answers, but got vague reassurances. While R&D and tech jobs grew, workers without coding skills or battery expertise were left behind. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a cultural fracture. Ford's name is tattooed into the soul of American industry. Now, it felt like that name had been traded for profit margins. And the ripple effects hit Washington fast. Lawmakers, especially Trump-aligned Republicans, exploded in outrage. Hearings were called. Headlines blared. What started as a corporate pivot became a national emergency. Behind closed doors, even Trump's allies realized something bigger was breaking. This wasn't just about Ford. It was the start of a broader unraveling, of manufacturing, of policy, of American economic identity. The system, built on predictable trade rules and global supply chains, was under siege. And companies like Ford had to choose, adapt or die. Trump's messaging turned combative, casting globalization as the villain and promising to punish corporate disloyalty. Investigations were floated, tariffs threatened, and Ford became a lightning rod. While some Democrats and centrists acknowledged the pain of Ford's decision, they also saw it as the inevitable result of outdated trade policies, political gridlock, and a failure to modernize. In the halls of Congress, debates erupted: should America double down on protecting legacy industries, or lean into the global competition driving innovation? Lawmakers demanded job guarantees, new clean energy subsidies, and urgent retraining programs. But Ford wasn't waiting for Washington to figure it out. As the political storm grew, the company accelerated its global strategy, building battery plants in Europe and Southeast Asia, launching new R&D centers, and restructuring leadership across borders. It was a bid for resilience in an unpredictable world. Ford wasn't retreating from the U.S., it was future-proofing itself against political chaos and supply chain disruptions. As Ford expanded abroad, Trump retaliated, drafting new tariffs, threatening to cancel federal contracts, and publicly lambasting the company for betraying American workers. But instead of fear, Trump's hardline stance sparked quiet panic across corporate America. If Ford could be targeted, who was safe? Behind the scenes, industry leaders pushed back. Trade associations issued cautious warnings, Wall Street cooled on U.S.-centric strategies, and whispers of similar moves by other automakers began circulating. A corporate revolt was brewing, not in protests, but in policy memos and private calls. Meanwhile, consumers took sides. Online, the backlash and support were equally fierce. Conservative voices called for boycotts, while progressives and environmentalists praised Ford's bold shift. In response, Ford launched a full-scale PR campaign, emphasizing investment in U.S. innovation and the inevitability of adaptation. But the cultural divide remained. For many factory towns, it felt like betrayal. For tech-driven regions, it looked like leadership. And while the media battled over narratives, Ford's competitors moved quietly. General Motors, Toyota, Stellantis, even Tesla, began rethinking their strategies. The EV race had become a global sprint, and flexibility, not loyalty, was now the key to survival. Automation and EV tech were changing what a factory job looked like, reducing the number of workers needed and shifting demand toward coders, engineers, and designers. Unions called for retraining and protections, but support was slow, and workers were left with uncertainty. The transformation wasn't purely about profit, it was about necessity. The very definition of labor was evolving. Ford's decision pulled back the curtain. America wasn't just losing jobs, it was losing its industrial identity. And it all leads to one unavoidable question: who really shapes America's economic future? Is it the politicians on Capitol Hill or the corporations building the next era of technology? Trump's vision centered on loyalty and nationalism. Ford's bet was on survival and innovation. Both offered strength, but only one could prevail. As the country watched this high-stakes showdown unfold, one thing became clear: globalization isn't a choice anymore. It's a force. And millions of Americans are left to figure out where they stand in a world where patriotism and profit no longer walk the same path. So now the question is yours: who do you stand with? Drop a comment.